Let's look at the small intestinal tract. The small intestinal tract, a typical small intestinal tract, is about 5 meters long and is divided into three parts: the duodenum, the jejunum, and the ileum. We can see that the starting point of a typical intestinal tract is at the pyloric canal, which is basically the end of the stomach, and then the end point. The end point of this entire structure is more visible posteriorly. So posteriorly, we can see near the ileocecal junction, where the ileum or the end part of the small intestine meets the cecum part of which is the end point of the small intestinal tract. That is that is it. The next thing that we can observe is the fact that the location of the small intestine is mostly abdominal in location, but it's important to know that it will be really hard to divide the entire structure into those four compartments that we saw in the case of stomach, but rather it will be easier to say that the small intestine mostly encompasses the entirety of the abdominal region. So, but it is important to know that this structure is highly mobile, which means that there's not a specific fixed position and a specific fixed relation like we know in other organs. Other organs are more or less they stay wherever they are. In the case of the in the case of the small intestinal tract, it's quite difficult because we can see that posteriorly it is attached to the posterior abdominal wall with the help of certain structures known as the mesenteries, and anteriorly it is covered by peritoneum. So, in the supine position, or when the person is laying down, you can see that most of the transverse, the entire thing, it projects outwards. But however, once in a supine, not in a supine position, that's once when a person is standing up, you can see that the entire structure is back into place and it becomes posterior to the organs that are in association with it. Okay, so let us learn about the first part of the small intestinal tract known as the duodenum. So the duodenum is located approximately at the level of the third lumbar vertebra, and the length and entirety of the duodenum is approximately 25 centimeter. Now, not all we know for the fact that most of the small intestinal tract is retroperitoneal in nature. However, in the case of duodenum, it is different because duodenum is a much more simpler part of of the small intestinal tract. It is much more wider, and the proximal part of it, proximal 2.5 centimeter of the duodenum, is intraperitoneal. That means it is situated between the peritoneum, and the rest of the duodenum is retroperitoneal in nature, in position. It is important to know that the duodenum is divided into four parts, namely the superior, the descending, the horizontal, and the ascending parts. Now let us take a look on each of these parts individually. So let us look at the first part of the duodenum known as the superior part of the duodenum. The superior part of the duodenum consists of the lesser omentum and the epiploic foramen, and then we have the bile duct, the head and neck of the pancreas, the portal vein, and the gastroduodenal arteries. So let us take a look at the organs and the structures that are found in the vicinity of the superior part of the duodenum. The first thing that we can observe here is the bile duct. As you can see, this is the bile duct here with the gallbladder. So that's the bile duct, and then we have the lesser omentum. That's the lesser omentum right there. And another thing that you can observe is that if you sort of look into the structure more deeply, you can notice that there is the epiploic foramen. Now, the epiploic foramen is somewhere here, somewhere here. It's a structure which is majorly responsible for giving an access to the internal part of the lesser omentum and the greater omentum. So that was it. Another thing that we can observe here is the pancreas. As you can see here, there's the head of the pancreas right there. So if you move it like past if you look at the posterior aspect, you can see it's much more clear. So we have the head and the neck of the pancreas that's also in close vicinity with the entire structure. Then we have the bile duct. The structure in green right here is known as the bile duct. Later we have two major arteries known as the gastroduodenal artery. So this one is the gastroduodenal artery, which is one of the branch of the hepatic, the common hepatic artery, which is the branch of the celiac artery. Then another structure that is in close vicinity is the hepatic portal vein, which is this one. Now let's look at the other part of the duodenum known as descending part of the duodenum. The descending part is approximately 8 centimeter long, and it extends from this incisor here, the duodenal flexure. So the flexure here is a curve, and from here it starts and extends all the way to the lower border of I think it's the third, runs inferiorly to the lower border of the third lumbar vertebrae. So that's the ending point of it, and then there's the other part of the duodenum that starts from here. So other than that, we have to keep in mind that only some parts of this entire structure is covered by the peritoneum, mostly the anterior superior part. So the small part of here, it is retroperitoneal in nature. That means it is covered anteriorly by the peritoneum. So the descending part of the duodenum lies posteriorly to the gallbladder, then the right lobe of the liver, and then we have the gastrocolic omentum. Now, gastrocolic omentum is basically a small type of structure that sort of attaches itself right on the inferior border of the descending part of the omentum. So if we look at the atlas here, we can see much more clearly that it lies posteriorly to the gallbladder. Then we have the right lobe of the liver, and then if you can see that here, there is going to be the greater omentum. We know for the fact that the peritoneum, it goes like this, and then it folds itself and it attaches itself. It needs some attachment. So the attachment is of course onto the duodenum. So we have to consider that. Okay, so let us look at what is actually present at the posterior portion of the descending part. So the posterior portion is in relation with the right kidney. Then we have the vessels of the right kidney. Then it's the head of the pancreas. And lastly, we have the right psoas major. Let us observe the same structures here in this atlas. Posteriorly, again, this is the right kidney. Then we have the inferior vena cava too. Okay, I forgot to mention this, but we have the inferior vena cava and the vessels of the right kidney too. Then we have the head of the pancreas that is closely and distinctly posterior to the duodenum. So that's the head of the pancreas right there. And then we have the right psoas major. So that's the right psoas major.